Hello there, my name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. I'm just having fun on the stage in my heels. It's where I belong, down at the Pink Pony Club. I've got no rhythm. Today I'm going to talk about some books in conversation with each other because I find that a great way of looking at books, as my reading aggregates over decades, noticing books that perhaps kind of speak to each other, borrow from each other, lean into each other over time is one of the most satisfying parts of my reading. Other things going on today. I'm going to be on a Zoom call later this afternoon where I've been invited. At the moment, most of this country has been in kind of lockdown. There's no schools. People are working from home. If you go to work, only essential workers, just because the whole getting bombed thing. So I was invited to speak. There's a group called the English Speaking Residents Association, which is a nationwide group of people who speak English, and I am going to be reading stories to 7 till 9-year-olds, a story on Zoom. I have a book here that I'm going to be reading from. This is called Elephants Don't Sit on Cars by David Henry Wilson, one of my favorite storybooks for young readers. They all feature a character called Jeremy James, who is a very matter-of-fact young man who just has lots of questions for his parents. He never really quite understands what's going on with grown-ups. And the opening story of this is called The Elephant on Daddy's Car. It's Jeremy James's mum who tells him elephants don't sit on cars. And I'm also going to be reading a poem, one of my favorite poems, a poem you probably already all know. And if you stick around at the end of this, I'll give you my rendition. Okay, books in conversation with the other, starting with the book that I read this week, which was a kind of, I don't know if this is, it's published by Fame Classics, so it's considered a classic. I don't think this was really in the canon when I was growing up, but then one of my oldest friends messaged me and said that when he studied French for his A-levels, so that's 11th, 12th grade, they studied this book, so I'm guessing he read it in French. I'm talking about Le Grand Meaulnes by Alain-Fournier. That is, that's hyphenated Alain-Fournier, so that's not actually his real name. His real name was Henri Albin, and not quite, no one's quite sure where this nom de plume came from and whether the hyphen's supposed to be there, but this book is generally attributed to Alain Fournier. This translation has been titled The Lost Estate. That's not a translation of Le Grand Meaulnes, and I apologize for my butchering French. I'm doing my best to this literally means Meulnes is the boy's surname, and it just means the Great Meulnes. So that's the first bit of conversation. This book comes out in 1912, and the idea of naming a book after a character, sort of a grandiose, like the Grand Meulnes, the Great Meulnes, a young boy, 17-year-old called Augustin Meulnes, who comes to a boarding school for the first time, and the Rhetor sees him, and everyone admires his charisma and his sense of adventure. I got a lot of what I understood about this from, this is a more recent translation, and this is from 2007, this translation. The book's originally published in 1912 in French, and this translation was by a gentleman called Robin Buss, and published in 2007. And this edition has an excellent introduction by a gentleman called Adam Gopnik, who I believe is a New Yorker writer, who I'm not familiar with, but he, in his introduction, which I read after I read the book, he goes back and points to Le Grand Meulnes, definitely has echoes The Great Gatsby, taking a character, and is it ironic, or is actually there's some greatness there? Is that the nature of a tragic hero, that there has to be some greatness, and these great romantic fools, and Augustin Meulnes in The Lost Estate of Le Grand Meulnes is definitely a romantic fool, maybe thematically linked to Jay Gatsby or Jay Getz. And the other thing, also, this was mentioned in the introduction, but I kind of made a connection, because this is a book that I read in the last couple of months, and I haven't spoken about it on here yet, because it's this is part of one of my projects, which is to read the young adult canon from the United States, books that we never read in England at all, but are part of everyone's basic understanding of literature. And this was my first time reading a separate piece by John Knowles, which, again, I apologize to American viewers for whom this is a fundamental part of their learning or their school, and may have tainted or increased the value of their experience of this book. But I encountered it for the first time, aged 55, and loved it. Absolutely fell in love with this book. And also here we have a narrator, a sort of Nick Carraway-esque narrator. Or what's the gentleman? Francois Surel is the young boy looking up to Augustin Meaulnes here. This idea of these people who are so charismatic that we are always in their shadow, and whatever happens to them in life, and things happen to Gatsby, things happen to Augustin Meaulnes, and things happen to, oh, what's the name of the character here? Pause 1 second, because this is silly. Okay, sorry about that. I was trying to think of Phineas's last name in a separate piece, narrated by Jean Forrester. Of course, Phineas is never given a last name, so I was racking my brains thinking, oh, I can't just call him Phineas. Then it sounds over-familiar, like I know. He's never given a last name. Phineas, or Finney, is this sort of a beautiful, charismatic lead character in this. And Jean Forrester, like Nick Carraway, like Francois, is always in his, just looking up to him, and spends, I guess, the rest of his life. Also a little bit of Brideshead Revisited, the relationship between Charles Ryder and Sebastian Flight. There's a lot of these echoes of the narrator never feeling quite like a whole person, and idolizing and mythologizing a character, to their own detriment, perhaps, and no one can ever live up to the mythology. Anyway, I'm getting into a bit much. So, books in conversation with each other. Le Grand Meaulnes, very. The other thing, Adam Gopnik, this great essay at the start of this, he talks about the thing that is at the heart of this story and why it has resonance or power for English readers is the absolute Frenchiness of it. It is the most ultimately French version of reality, where a boy goes off an adventure. It's kind of a fairy tale, and we don't quite know. And he comes back, and he's forever chasing the beautiful princess that he thinks he's seen. And for that first stage of the book, we're not even sure if this is real or if this is some kind of fantasy. But eventually we find out what actually is truth and what happens and who the princess is. And throughout the great Meaulnes is chasing something, and perhaps we should never reach the thing that we're chasing. That's part of the story, but it's also a story about never growing up, about life being a constant adventure and a need to keep moving and keep finding. Terribly sad, terribly beautiful, terribly romantic, a little bit bonkers, because and so it reads a little bit like YA, just because the perspectives change, things that are sort of fun and wow, you fall in love at first sight, but then become hugely, massively weighed down by life and reality and the sort of spectre of eroticism. It's not really, there's no actual sex or sexiness in the same way. Again, this is not my point. This is from this essay, that we can't actually imagine Jay and Daisy hooking up or doing it. It's just this sort of romanticized, idolized version of obsessive love, and we have that same kind of thing going on here. I love this. Maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe you'll tell me why it's weak and silly. I think this translation was excellent. So maybe if you've encountered this book, it might have been an older, earlier translation. This translation by Robin Buss, who in the intro or in the blurb to the book, it says that he already has passed away. But I really found this an excellent translation, very readable. Just, is it real? Is it a fantasy? Should we chase our fantasies? Should we ever grow up? Is romantic love always the most important thing? And on and on and on, all in exquisite French accent in beautiful French countryside. I really like this. That is Le Grand Meaulnes by Alain-Fournier, In this translation, it's called The Lost Estate. That's not a translation, that's just the title that's been given. Also recommend, because I haven't spoken about it here, if you've never read A Separate Piece by John Knowles, I really like that as well. And again, they both have that whiff of YA-ness about them. Books that I probably should have read when I was 15, 16, which is when I read Catcher in the Rye. Somewhere in there, he's narrating his own romantic view of life, but unreliably so. But I never read either of these books. I'm so pleased I did now because I enjoyed them both. Okay. Now I'm just going to recite. So I told you I'm doing this group later today with a bunch of sort of 7 to 9 year olds on Zoom. I don't know how many are going to turn up, and I'm supposed to entertain them for 20 minutes, half an hour, just because no one's really going out and there's no one going to school. So I'm going to read The Elephant on Daddy's Car by David Henry Wilson, the first Jeremy James short story, and I'm going to recite a poem by Spike Milligan called On the Ning Nang Nong, because I think I'm going to talk about words that represent sounds and aren't really words. So in the Jeremy James story, for example, Jeremy points out that his mother and his father, when they don't have a good answer for him, they just go humph. And he goes into a whole explanation of what humph means and how he once tried to employ it to his mother, and his mother turned to him and said, "Don't you start." And that's a fun story. And so the Ning Nang Nong by the great Spike Milligan is full of noises, onomatopoeic and exciting, because the Ning Nang Nong is a terribly noisy place. And the poem, if you're not familiar with it, goes something like this. On the Ning Nang Nong, where the cows go bong and the monkeys all go boo, there's a Nong Nang Ning where the trees go bing and the teapots jibber jabber jew. On the Nong Ning Nang, the mice go clang, and you just can't catch them when they do. So, Ning Nang Nong, cows go bong, Nong Nang Ning, trees go bing, Nong Ning Nang, mice go clang. What a noisy place to belong on the Ning Nang Ning Nang Nong. And that is all I'm going to do for today. God bless, bye.